Welcome to Author Voices on Air, and I'm your host, Rick Bell. Our next book, Harp, is set in the context of Zeitgeist and idealism of the late 60s, a book about love, longing, and coming of age. And here to tell us more is the author, Niti Dalmia. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Now, as I mentioned during the introduction, it's a book about life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So tell us the story behind the story behind the book, and how it came to be, and how you came to write and publish this book.
Well, I always wanted to write, and I didn't want it to remain just a dream. So I thought of the Rolling Stones song, "Catch Your Dreams Before They Slip Away." In fact, I remember one of my closest school friends asked me in school. He assumed, because I came from a business family, he assumed that I'd go into business, and I did. But I said I want to be a writer. So he was very surprised. And he had a physique like a boxer. So I told him that I think you'll be a boxer. Very heavy shoulders. But he turned out to be a restaurateur in Melbourne, Australia, a very successful one. And amongst other things, I turned out to be a writer. So this is something I wanted to do, and I wanted to start off with, I wanted to describe as you mentioned, the hope and idealism of the 60s, and many of us at the time thought it would never end. And I wanted to write about the coming of age in that special time, growing up in the late 60s, and how the themes conveyed were universal, and how everyday life was interspersed, amongst other things, with the music of the times. And I also wanted to write about the universality of human emotions and feelings, and even more so of human experience, about the brotherhood of all men, and attempts at categorization, a distortion of the continuum, because it's in fact a continuum. And also to tell a tale about how one is torn between love and obligation, between the head and the heart, between one's social contract and what one really wants. The individual choices one has to make with profound consequences, and to, above all, to portray a deeply felt love story as different as any individual experience can be.
Now, it certainly is a book that will appeal, I should say, to a lot of different people. But when you were writing the book, who did you have in mind as the type of person that this book would appeal to?
In fact, Rick, I didn't have any type of person in mind, because I didn't want to be self-conscious about the reader, the profile of the reader. B, I just wanted to convey these thoughts, these emotions, those times. In a sense, it is also a period piece, because now the late 60s is quite some time back. And so I didn't have a profile. But what I did hope was that it would have as broad an appeal as possible.
What would you say the main thing that the reader will learn or take away from reading this book?
I would say there is nothing as important as true love. You should follow your heart, and it's better to have loved and lost than not to have loved at all, to use an old saying. It is always worth the risk. There are no guarantees. It may work out, it may not work out, but how should life be lived without regrets? Not to have regrets. At the end, it's things that we wanted and didn't do that cause regrets, not the things that we did wrong.
Absolutely. Tell us a little more about some of the scenes and the characters in the book.
Okay. The special scenes, I would say, one is the way the book starts off. There is a kissing scene with Nalini and the parents turning up eventually. It's quite sensuous, and how Ashok jumps from the first floor window. That's in chapter one. Then I would say, moving on to chapter 19, the parting with Lauren at the train station in Poland. The That's quite poignant. Then the chapter 24, I would say, drawing the ice cream machine in Seinäjoki, Finland, and being stared at while drawing. Then in the same chapter, the late night scene in Irina and Hannah's house. Chapter 72, torrential rain, with the sky turning all kinds of colors as it does in the monsoon here. It's unbelievable. And the back of the Morris car with Lauren.
We've talked about the fact that the book is most definitely set in the 60s, and it takes place a location. It's not just one location. It really takes the reader around the world.
Yes.
Is there any one particular place within the story that is special for you as the author and special for the reader?
I would say if there has to be, I would say there are at least two places. One is Paris, for example, going down the steps of the Montmartre. And the other place would be the Chopin statue, which is on the cover of the book. When there would be Chopin concerts in Lake Marzinkovsky in Warsaw every Sunday, free concerts with the music wafting all over the park.
A book to lose yourself in, a story to really live inside.
Exactly.
In your own words, what would you say makes this book in particular unique and special?
I would say it's a love story deeply felt. It's about love and longing, and it's as different as any individual experience can be. Why are snowflakes all different? Why are our voice prints all different? So each of us have love stories. There is a common denominator, but it's the individual experience that defines it. So it's above all the deeply felt love, and also the fact that it is set in the Iron Curtain, which no longer exists. And that was another word. It wasn't the third word. It wasn't the first word. It was the second word. And the special time of the late 60s, which have now gone away like dreams, but which changed and shaped the world forever afterwards.
What do you think it is about the 60s that really counts?
Above all, the period before the 60s was pretty conservative. And especially in America, there was McCarthyism, there was the Cold War, there was the raids under the bed fear, and it was very conservative, religious. And then, of course, there was the Vietnam War, which acted as a catalyst. Many people didn't want to go and fight that war. And so there were student revolutions. And there were student revolutions all over the world because everybody had issues. There were the student revolutions of 1968 in Paris, which in fact led to students tearing up the street stones and throwing them at the police. And as a consequence of that, later on, the establishment broke up the Sorbonne from one university into many small universities. So There was the student revolutions in London. There was Tariq Ali, the leader of the British students' movement. So everywhere there were student revolutions in Warsaw, in Tokyo, all over the world, and they all wanted to change the world.
Now let's take you back to the early days when you decided that you wanted to write this book. Share with us some of the challenges and rewards for you when you sat down and started writing this book.
I would say it's a lonely job to write a book, and doubts are bound to come. Tastes and liking are subjective, and then you wonder, will it be good? Will the reader like it? Will it give pleasure? Will it stir the reader's imagination? So you have these doubts, yet you write, and you can't write too self-consciously, worrying all the time. How does it sound? How does it look? Because then that will cramp your style, that will ruin it. So you just have to write and edit it later, but you have to freely express yourself. And then I was very busy with business. This business by nature is something that takes up a lot of your time. That's why it's called busyness. But I persisted with this irrepressible urge to tell a story, little by little. And the biggest challenge is to believe in yourself and your writing, despite everything, because you're unknown, you're a nobody. So you just express yourself, and the reward ultimately comes from the pleasure of description, of living those moments in those places, and of meeting those characters that come to life.
Now, after your experience of writing and publishing your first book, has it inspired you to possibly write a sequel or maybe move on to write a book about something completely different?
Written, in fact, something, and that was written prior to this, but I know it needs a lot of editing. So I will edit that, and that's completely different. I don't know if I'll do a sequel because I've deliberately left many, I've deliberately raised questions in the narrative and left them unanswered. But I think that's how life is. We don't always get answers to questions, and many things remain question marks. So we'll see about a sequel. But yes, I will write further.
In closing, is there anything you would like to add that we maybe haven't talked about yet that you would like our listeners and your readers to know about this book?
Yes. I would say that above all, if I had the music of the time, the myriads of groups, some of them are still well known and some of them are no longer as well known. But if people can hear some of that music again and enjoy it, I think it's timeless and its messages are timeless. So if people can take pleasure from some of that music again, that would be a reward in itself.
Thank you. Harp is published by Lulu and is available direct from the publisher at lulu.com and all good bookstockists. Once again, I would like to thank my guest, the author Nindhe Dalmia, for joining us on the show, and we wish him every success with his new book and his writing in the future. This is Rick Bell for Talking Out Radio. Thank you for listening.